Welcome to another episode of The Giant Leap, the podcast where we explore what it really takes to create success that's meaningful, lasting, and entirely your own. Every week, we sit down with extraordinary people who've taken massive leaps in business, health, happiness, freedom, and family, and we uncover the real stories behind their success. Today's guest is a renowned life coach, columnist for GQ, and the author of How to Do You. She's known for helping people master their mindset, take control of their thoughts, and radically transform their lives from the inside out. She's worked with everyone from high-level entrepreneurs to global celebrities, but her real gift lies in showing anyone how to reclaim their power, rewrite their story, and become who they were always meant to be.
Jacqueline Hurst, welcome to the show.
Gosh, what an amazing introduction. I'm literally looking behind me thinking, like, who are they talking about?
Well, it's you. We're talking about you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be on. And I'm really excited to talk today and be interviewed by you guys. So yeah, I like the openness of like, let's see what happens. I love that organic process. It's always the best.
Exactly.
So let's start off, Jacqueline. I've been reading your book, How to Do You. For those who haven't read it, can you give us a snapshot of what life was like for you in your earlier years?
It was a roller coaster. It's probably the best word to explain that. It was wild, crazy, unhappy, and a real foundation of the woman that I am today, I would say. So it included many addictions, and it included alcoholism, drug addiction, anorexia, like depression, anxiety, like you name it, I did it, from the ages of around 15 to 25. And things changed around 25 when it was sort of a gift of desperation to make massive change. And so I am a believer of sort of, when you look back, that the extreme of everything I went through, there was a reason to that, and it's got me, clear of all of the mindset stuff that I teach people today. It taught me how to do that. Without that, I wouldn't be here, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. We find that happens a lot in successful people's lives, that there's some trigger, something that has happened that actually accelerates them to where they are. So what is it that in your story that at that turning point that made you take the leap into success rather than keep going down that path?
Well, I didn't know I was going to be successful at being clean and sober and healthy. Like I had no idea. I just know that, after like being in, desperate times for such a long time, that there was only one way, which was like further down. And that means like end it kind of thing. And I tried that a few times and it never worked. So I got to this point where it was like, I literally can't go down any further. And I wonder what it might look like if I, put my foot on the stairs of actually going up, like what would happen then? And, I was very lucky. I was very desperate. I was very broken. And I was very lucky that deep inside myself somewhere was this like serious determination to get better. And I was willing to do whatever it took to get there. And that was the thing, I had this sort of deep thing inside me. If you'd have said to me, go running down the road, stark naked at 3 a.m, and that will help you, I'd have said, okay, like whatever it took.
Wow.
And, I had that fierce determination to do that.
Do you think you were born with the determination, or do you think that came from just being at rock bottom?
I think it could be a bit of both, to be honest with you. And I think that, especially with addiction, that the statistics, one of the statistics I've read, and I'm sure there's millions, but one of them I've read is that only 4% of people get clean and stay clean. And I understand why, it is not easy, but you must have a willingness to want to get better and a willingness to change and a willingness to say, I'm ready to rip my ego apart and get humble. And I'm willing to look at my part, and I'm willing to be honest now. And I'm willing to literally change everything to become that person. And, I think addicts get a really bad rap. Like, I'm a believer that addiction is based on a deep emotional wound. And I don't think it's because addicts are bad people, So look, we can have this conversation for hours about, my views on this stuff. But I do think that when you are given the gift of desperation, and I do believe it's a gift, not many people get it, right? They don't get that gift. I was one of the lucky ones to have it. And I think when we do have that gift, you just keep pushing through because you just don't want to go back there. There's nothing back there for you.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've had experience in kind of going like really like rock bottom, and it's amazing like the insights that you can have when you are just there and nothing else matters, and it's either like you're ready to kind of leave, and then like something like looking in the mirror doesn't matter, eating food doesn't matter, and then you get that the pureness of just you and what actually matters in life, and then you can start focusing on what actually matters, and that's so powerful. I mean,
You're completely right. You're
go there.
completely right. Yeah. And that's how we become present, right? Like, these things, I love what you've said. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
When it comes to success, your own personal success, how do you define what success is? What success look like for you?
It's funny. I used to write a big column for GQ, and I remember writing an article on that about success and what it looks like. And we live in this society, don't we, where we are told that success is a Lamborghini and a, multi-billion pound whatever and 8 gazillion Instagram followers. That always makes me laugh because all of that stuff's outside of ourselves. For me, I will define my own success as an inner peace. Having inner peace to me is the most successful thing I've ever done. And that means I live a life where, I can sort of float through it and not be, drowned by the waves sometimes, or, super high about me. Like, I just bob along, and it feels good to be peaceful inside, to like know myself and like myself and be all right with whatever is going to happen. So to me, that's what success is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. Actually, that is exactly my view as well. What is it that enables people to get to that happy state?
A lot of work.
Yeah.
I was going to swear, but I didn't. A lot of work. You've got to do your internal work. And I bang on about it all the time, like, do your work, do your work, do your work. And that's exactly what I mean. Like, do your work. You have to look at the things that, have affected you, or your patterns, or your, unconscious thinking. You've got to do that stuff to look at how to have a peaceful life. You can't do that blaming other people. You can't do that if you don't like yourself. Like, you have to do the work. It's really important.
When you say do the work, can you explain that for people that don't, they might never have come to a situation where they're at the point in their journey where they need to look internally, but they don't know how to. So how do you start on that journey of doing the work? What is that?
There's so much out there for us to start doing the work, right? There's YouTube videos, there's books you can listen to on audiobooks, on Spotify or whatever. Like, there's so much stuff out there. And I consider doing the work, coaching, therapy, courses, anything that is to do with your self-development, your internal, and there is so much stuff that we can look at and do. When I started my business 20 years ago, or 20, more than that, actually, way more than that, but I can't. Anyway, when I started my business, sorry, like me and my math, nobody was talking about mental health in England. And I remember talking to people and saying, I'm a life coach. And they looked at me and said, you're a what? Like, they just thought there was something wrong with me, And I remember writing to all the public schools, and I thought, well, I'm just going to ask if I can go in and give a talk to, like, the young kids, and say, like, can I come in and give a talk about mental health? And all these public schools wrote back and said, we've got a nurse on site, thanks. And I thought, no, you're totally missing the point, right? And then you look at where we are today in 2025 and you think, wow, look how many people are talking about mental health. It's fantastic, right? So yeah, that's when I say do the work, I mean go internal and you know, look at yourself. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the most exciting thing about this exciting part of the life you've created now?
Gosh, what an interesting question. What's the most exciting part of the life I've created?
Yeah.
I think if my younger self was looking at myself today, I think, you know, she'd be in awe because I went through so many tough times and so many times where I really didn't think I'd make it. I would look at myself today and think, gosh, you did, right? Which there were many times I never thought I would. And I think what's exciting is I'm a real life lover today. I love life. And I really, you know, my journey was I didn't have children, I couldn't have kids, but I built my businesses and I built my school and I wrote my book. And a lot of that comes with this place where I have opportunities everywhere. I can literally do whatever I put my mind to doing. I can be any country, I can work from anywhere. Like I love looking at life at what opportunities can I grab rather than any negative way of looking at it. I don't really believe in that. So I think it's exciting that I don't really know what's next. Could it be a second book? Could it be something, you know, my life's always been very interesting. So I just don't know what's coming next, but I'm excited by that. I'm not like, oh God, I don't know what, you know, like, wow, what's next? Because it could be anything. And I believe that with my life, like for sure.
Did you ever sit down and kind of work out like a perfect day or anything like that, or did you just kind of do the work and then getting that mind clarity and you know that positive self-talk inside your mind, is that how what created this life, or did you sit down and create a kind of plan of what the perfect day looked like or the perfect
I
life?
never had a plan, never ever had a plan. I just had an internal gut feeling of, you know, what I wanted to do, and nothing was gonna deter me from that. And I had you know, I had this sort of, and I was young and naive in the beginning, you know, I was 20 something, and in your 20s, you don't ever, well, I didn't in my 20s, I didn't have enough experience. So I thought to myself, I never even thought about it not working. Like that wasn't even a possibility in my brain. And I look back at that and I think, wow, like I must have been really confident. Like I just genuinely knew this thing was going to work. And even though there was all these naysayers around me, I just knew that I was meant to be doing this and I was going to build it and it was going to be something that was going to, you know, the aim of the whole thing was to help other people. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about status. It wasn't about a name or a whatever. It was about how can I help as many people as I can? And I think, you know, doing good brings good as well. So I think there's a part of that energetically in the universe too. But I had absolutely zero thought about it not working, which really makes me laugh today because it's like, how
Yeah,
could I?
when you're younger, you have like no experience to compare it up against. So like you have no experience to be like, well, if I do this, it's going to fail. It's like, well, surely if I do this, it'll work. Like you have that
Yeah, I
energy, don't you?
didn't. Absolutely. There was that word failed just wasn't even in my vocab. Just
Yeah.
wasn't even in my vocab, which
Talking
makes
about
me
failure, have you ever had a moment where it felt like life was falling apart, but in hindsight, it was actually falling into place?
definitely through my addiction times, yes. Definitely through certain personal experiences I had in relationships, yes. And I would tell you from those experiences that every single time I thought like you know, exactly what you said, like this is just unbelievable. Like life is totally fallen apart. I have bounced back stronger and better. And I can't, as I said earlier, I wouldn't be the woman I am today without those experiences, even through the trauma. And I'm talking serious trauma, right? Like that stuff made me, you know. So yeah, I'm grateful for those experiences. And I think a lot of people would look at me and say, that's wild that you would say that you were grateful for them, but I genuinely, truly am.
I totally get that. And I think we talk a lot on this podcast about if you know, aspire to climb like climb Everest kind of thing, you got to do the training to get there. If
I
you're
love
someone
that.
that just wants to climb like a normal mountain, you know, you're going to have normal life experiences. But if you're someone that really wants to like challenge yourself and push yourself to the limits and see how far you can go, you're going to have to do some serious life training.
You are, and you also have to expect that. And I always say this to my clients, like if you use someone like Serena Williams, like she didn't win every match to become as amazing as she was. Like that whole thing of her losing matches is part of the plan. It's not separate from it or bad or wrong. Like that has to be incorporated. And I think, you know, that whole thing around society's view of like failure is ridiculous. Like it's part of success. And I wish more people knew that.
I'm going to ask you a question that's really interesting because we ask it a lot, and you've said that your experiences have made you who you are. But if you woke up tomorrow at age 11 with all the wisdom you have now, what would you do differently? Or
Nothing,
would you? No.
nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it's so wild because my journey, you know, I've written a book, but that's only really a sprinkling of what happens. And if I think you know, if I really wrote my life story, you know, I think a lot of people would be really surprised that I've said I wouldn't change anything, but I genuinely wouldn't change anything. Like the real hard times, you know, where I had no money, I lived in a squat, you know, I had nothing other than a drug addiction at one point of my life. Even that was like a beautiful experience to go through. You know, and all of the things that I've experienced, like for sure, I just wouldn't have changed any of it. And I even saying that aloud now, I'm like, wow, I can't even believe that, but it is the truth. Like it
Yeah.
has, single thing has got me here today, you know, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah, that's amazing because that's that when we first thought up that question and we first asked it of each other, we both sat there and I said the same thing. I said, well, if I changed something, then I wouldn't be me. And I think a lot of people that have been through things in their lives, yes, we don't want to go through it, but if you've come out the other side and you've learned from your failures or the hardship or you've learned something, then you've become stronger for it. You've become the person, it's part of who you are, and you take that away.
Yeah.
I think you only think that if you are emotionally evolved or evolving or wanting to. I think if you don't want to do that, then you'll look at your life and have regrets and be in pain and look at the negative side of it and oh, that shouldn't have happened. You know, there are some people that will do that, and that's fine, that's up to them. But those are not the people that are choosing to look at themselves and grow and evolve and you know and learn from that. And there are plenty of people that just don't want to do that, you know.
From reflecting on your book, what have you learned since writing that book, and what would you write differently now?
Gosh, so much. I think that was done in 22. And I'm constantly asked to do a second one, which I think I'm going to do. And yeah, lots has changed since then. Again, it was like that was like my first baby, really. And it was, I didn't really, you know, it was the first time I did that. So since then I've learned so much more. In lots of different ways, not necessarily my work, because, you know, that's just something, you know, I think that has remained constant. And I've worked with over 9,000 clients. So, you know, if I work with 10,000, that difference isn't major. But I think in my personal life, definitely I've learned a lot more about certain things. And I think that's really helpful on the path.
What have you learned having had lots of, you know, wealthy, high profile, and even famous clients? What have you learned about success from them?
Well, I think when you look at people like that, again, what I would say is that society and social media portrays people like that to have it all, and that therefore they must be happy, and aren't they lucky? And what people forget is they're real people too. And I think that's something really important because we just get brainwashed, don't we? That, wow, they, you know, they are a very famous actress and therefore they must have this amazing life, but they're still real people, you know, same as like royalty. They're still real people underneath what you're seeing from outside.
It's something that struck me to the introduction to your book is that, you know, you kind of it came across of this life of privilege and opened me up to a world that I've never had any insights into. and how a life of privilege can really be the opposite. Like, you know, how
It's
people
what it
expect you
looked like, you know, from the outside, that it looked like, wow, you know, she had this beautiful home and she lived in this, she went to private school, blah, blah, blah. But what people didn't realize behind that was, you know, I was in serious pain. There was nobody in the house except me and my sister most of the year. And I was walking to school and being bullied, you know, and beaten up black and blue. And I came home and there was no one. And, you know, I was deeply unhappy. But again, that's a perfect example of what you see from the outside, and also people's views on privilege and money and that kind of thing. You know, when I was younger, my dad said, like, here's a little bit of money, right, to get you moving in your life. Like, you know, here's 5 grand or whatever, and don't be knocking on the door again. But people will assume, oh, well, she got brought up like that, so she was fine. But no one, you know, it wasn't like that. You know, you can't get that far in life on 5 grand for your whole life. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but people will say, gosh, you know, well, she was okay. And it just wasn't that way.
But it's amazing how, you know, through your life you realize that you really do have to stand on your own 2 feet and not rely on other people. And it sounds like you had to learn that from quite an early age.
I learned that from 10 years old. And
Yeah.
it was, you know, and with that came its own stuff, you know, about hyper independence and learning how not to be that person. You know, it's been such a journey all the way through from 10. Yeah.
What role does discomfort play or pain play in personal growth?
It's imperative.
Yeah.
Because why would you change if you're comfortable?
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? Yeah. You need the pain to make the change.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about your inner voice. What did you do to program your own? And what practical hacks have you got that somebody else could start using to change their own inner voice?
I think the inner voice question is a really good one, because we have all got it. Let's start there. And we often know it's there, but don't do anything about it. It's almost like a conditioning, right? Like, we know it's there, we can hear it, but we just ignore it. We literally ignore ourselves. We ignore our soul. And I think the first step of a practical advice, which was something I did, which was learn not to ignore it. I'm not even saying do anything about it right now. I'm just saying learn not to ignore it. Like, what I see is real with my eyes. What I feel is real. What I hear when someone says something, right? If they say, can you turn the television on? That's real. I've heard that. But we're very good at ignoring, oh, I'm not sure. Oh, did they? Oh, right. So learning that what we see and what we feel is real is very important. I'm talking like connecting with your soul. So I think that's the first thing, of like not ignoring the voice. And then I think the second thing is to say, I hear that voice. Now, what must I do? And that can take us time. It's not an overnight process. The first step is listening to it and not ignoring it. And then the second step is acting on that. So it's a process. I mean, it was definitely a process for me. I ignored it a lot. And every time I ignored it, I got it wrong. You know, I wished I hadn't. And today, like, I always say, like, try me now. Like, try me.
It's mad because I've had the kind of addictive inner voice, and the madness that it can kind of trick you into is amazing. Like how it can duck and weave and, like, you know, figure out ways of getting around things.
Yeah, and that's another reason also, like, not to ignore it. Like, and that's a really good example. Like, when the voice is like, yeah, but it will be all right if you got to bring that voice out, and literally, I mean, I remember when I got clean and we talked about that in recovery, and someone said to me, you know, you should talk back to it. And I was like, what, walk down the street and talk back to it? And he was like, yeah, give it a go. And I thought, all right, I will. And I remember literally walking down the street going, no, we're not, Jacqueline, right? As like a mad woman. But actually, it made me laugh, and it made me put that, you know, inner voice thing, especially the addiction side of it, into its place. And I think that's quite a powerful tool, you know.
How do you spot the difference between a helpful thought and a sabotaging one?
On how it feels.
Okay.
So does a helpful thought feel good? if it does, that's a helpful thought for me. Does a sabotaging thought feel bad? Likely, in which case that's not what I want to do. It's all about how you feel from the thinking.
Yeah, it's funny how we can like know, but we ignore it anyway. Like, you know, that thing will say something, like the inner voice will say something, and you know that it's the wrong thing, but you're like, oh, come on, let's go along with that anyway.
Because we're human, and it's, you know, and that's a very normal thing to do.
Eat the whole chocolate cake. Oh
I,
no, don't eat the whole chocolate cake.
I was waiting for something like that, right? And it's like with that, you know, you're human. Of course, you're going to have your moments. Like, I think that's the other thing about self-development. Like, we think we're meant to be these perfect people, but we're not. Sometimes you might want to eat the chocolate cake, you know, and it's, to me, that's not the problem. To me, the thing is what you do afterwards and how are you treating yourself afterwards? Because when you judge yourself, you miss the lesson, right?
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, that's really true. If you give yourself the treat, you should enjoy the treat.
Well,
So
otherwise, what's the point of the treat, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you sit there and go, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, and feel bad afterwards, then why have you done it?
Then you're going to only get worse and eat the treat more, I think.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing to unpack. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, who has been your biggest mentor or influence in your journey, and what did they teach you?
I've had many, and I've been very lucky with that, you know. So I would say that, you know, it started off with my grandpa. He was always way ahead of his time. He was great. My father was a huge influence. I lost him sadly last year, but he was a huge influence on my life, and sometimes not in a good way, right? Like we would clash, but that was also very important for me, you know, to learn to step away from what my parents thought about me, and I didn't have to, you know, please them, because that adults have that a lot. So he was a huge influence. I would say my sponsors through the recovery process. I had a therapist that was amazing. I had a lady help me with my eating disorder that became a friend. She's this tough New York woman, love her. And I would say that, you know, certain people in the spiritual world of things were very, you know, Wayne Dyers and Abraham Hicks and people like that, Eckhart Tolle, that was, you know, they were amazing through that process. So I'm always open to be taught. I know that the more I know, the less I know. And I know that I always want to be like the least smart person in the room. I do not want to be the smartest one in it. Otherwise, I didn't learn anything. So I'm always open to being taught and to learning.
These days, do you feel free of you know, the addiction of do you feel like you fully, completely trust yourself, or is there sometimes where you have to, you know, do a certain technique or have that conversation with yourself still these days? Or are you totally free?
I would tell you, which is a great question again. So I've been clean. I'm coming into my 22nd year. And the minute I put down drugs, I did a lot of work to understand why I use the drugs, right? Because the drugs are just the symptom of the problem. So when I understood that and I worked on myself, etc., I had zero desire to use a drug ever again, right? Like I could be around it, not that I'd ever want to be, but let's say I was around it. It would be like saying, eat that horse manure. Like, ew, no. Like, I genuinely was like, no. I will be honest, and I will say that when my dad was dying last year, it was a deeply, deeply emotionally hard time for me. And there was a moment of that voice in my head, which I hadn't had for 22 years, which was, do you know what? A joint right now would be. And I was like, holy beep, beep, beep. Like, where did this come from? And I did what I know to do. And I went straight to a meeting or 3 or 4 that week. And then I was back to normal again. And so the difference today is I know I'm not going to do it. I know I'm not going to do it. I have zero desire to. Like, why would I put a drug in my body and ruin everything I've created for the last 22 years? Like, zero reason. But there was that moment, you know, which was like, oh, this might be a good idea. And I was like, wait, what? Who are you? You know, I know what to do. I've got the tools in my bank, you know, but, you know, things have to be really like things that had to be a really serious thing to make me think that for 1 second. So, but I do think that when you do your work around your addiction, you really do your work around it. I am a believer that and again, this is contentious, but I'll say, like, I don't really believe in addiction. I believe in emotional pain and using things to make us not feel that feeling.
Yeah, I get that. I gave up, well, not gave up, I just stopped drinking about 3 years ago. Didn't really have a problem with it, but didn't see a benefit to it. And these days, the thought of having a drink, I'm like, why would I, it's such a big risk. It feels like such a huge risk. Like I could derail like all this happiness and success I've created just by having a drink and then waking up like hungover, and it could all fall apart. Like that seems ridiculous.
Can I pause you 1 second? That's my doorbell. Can you give me 1 second? Sorry
Yeah,
about that. Not normal. That whole thing about what you just said, which was like not, you're like, why would I ruin that amount of time? Like that does happen the more time you get under your belt. And I think that's a really good thing to have, because the more you work at it, the less you want to destroy that, because you get more mentally well.
Yeah, definitely. I am really aware of your time as well, because we've got to be time conscious. So last couple of questions from us. Number one, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface really here, but we've done it, we've scratched away, and I think we could definitely dig in a bit more
You're gonna
into
have to
everything.
write another book and then we'll get you back on.
That would be a pleasure.
There's lots of tools in the book, how to not procrastinate, loads of different things. So if anybody does want to reach out, then obviously go and get your book. But is there any other places that people can find you, reach out to you?
So my website is jacquelinehurst.com, and my school is called thelifeclass.com. And there you can train to be a life coach, or you can do your own short course. It's called the Foundation Course on Your Mindset. And my book is called How to Do You, which is on Amazon, all of those different places. There's an audio book too for that. And my Instagram is Jacqueline_Hurst_.
Excellent.
We'll leave it all in the show notes. What's the most exciting thing that's coming up for you in the future?
I think probably I'm going to say the second book.
Yeah.
That's the thing I am allowed to talk about. But yeah, the second book I would say is exciting.
When can we expect it?
I'm going to say I'm going to say probably January 26.
Okay, exciting. You've heard it here, everybody. January 26th.
We're aiming for it. Yeah. One never knows.
Okay, one final question from us. Jacqueline Hurst, are you successful?
I'm going to say, because I'm peaceful, the answer to that is yes.
Perfect. I love it.
Awesome.
Absolutely love it.
Thank you so much for coming on The Giant Leap. You've been incredible, and so many awesome nuggets that you've shared with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I could talk to you guys for ages.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, because we could talk to you for ages as well.
Lovely.
So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
We're